Hey Mother Bear, welcome to this presentation where we're going to be talking about seeing below the surface. Why? So that we can prevent destructive behavior in our cubs. And we don't ever want to find ourselves in a position of saying, didn't see that coming. So before I get started, let me just introduce myself. My name is Mr. Advocate. I'm the founder of Rise to Your Top, and I'm the team leader of champions of Mother Bears, both in business and at home. Okay, let's get going, if I can only say that. First of all, let's look at the problem. Why aren't we seeing what's going on below the surface? Let's look at our cubs first. What's going on in them? First of all, we know that they might not be telling us everything that's going on, underneath them, underneath the surface, inside them, the turmoils that they're having. So they actually intentionally hide things from us. Ever experienced that, where your cubs aren't telling you everything? Well, that's pretty common, right? So that is a problem. They get into a mode of not telling us what's going on inside them. The other thing is, they may not know what's going on inside. So how are you going to share something if you can't really identify your fears and the problems? And some things in life we don't know. For example, the melancholy, for example, has low self-esteem, a lot of mood swings, and everything else. They have all kinds of things that are happening. If they're actually not in their natural design zone, they're going to be stressed. So there doesn't even have to be a stressful scenario around us. We could be in a nice, calm place like here in the lake, but they could be stressed because they're not in their natural design zone. So they may not know why there's turmoil inside. Therefore, how can they really communicate that to us? The other thing that can happen, again, especially with the melancholy who has low self-esteem, they might say, well, nobody really cares about what's going on. And I tried to share, but they really weren't listening, so they might cop an attitude of, again, nobody wants to really know. They're busy. They might make up excuses on our behalf of why we don't want to hear, which may not be true, but they may come down to that conclusion, themselves. So they have these issues that are preventing us from seeing what's below the surface. But let's look at ourselves. Let's look at ourselves, Mother Bear. What issues might we have that we're not seeing what's going on below the surface? And one might be we're not looking. We're just not looking what's going on. We're just say what we see is what we get, no more, no less. So we're not focused there. We're not intentionally trying to look below the surface. And unfortunately, that requires a different part of who we are. Looking is really a seeing process. It's a cognitive or even feeling. That's kind of surface. But to look below the surface, you need to go to your heart. You need to go to the spiritual side of who you are. And it's in your spiritual side that you'll be able to see or at least connect and to understand what's going on below the surface. So we might have to make an adjustment of being too cerebral and move to the spiritual side of who we are and access our heart, at the same time. Sometimes we're so busy, so overwhelmed with life ourselves, we don't want to look below the surface. We're not sure we have the energy to deal with what's below the surface, in our cups, and that's real, and it's a problem, and don't beat yourself up on it because it's really tough to do everything that we have to do in life. But that still can be an issue that we might have to address. And the second one or a third one is that sometimes we're not looking below the surface because it might be self-incriminating in that we might know that we're part of the problem with our cups, and then it's pretty hard to deal with that. So that might be another issue. Is we might see something about ourselves. We might know that we're part of the problem, and again, it's just too overwhelming right now to go below the surface. Now, before I give you solutions, I just want to make the point that more is happening below the surface than what we see. And I'm going to just use, two metaphors, to explain that, to make sure that all of us has that firmly in our mind. One is the iceberg. The iceberg, we see the tip of the iceberg. When you describe an iceberg, we can't just describe it by the tip. because there's more below the iceberg than there is, in terms of the tip above the surface, if you like. The second one is really the water aspect. We have this pond behind us. Did you know that 71% of the planet is water? Therefore, 71% of the planet is below the surface. So I think nature is clearly telling us that there's more below, there is above, and therefore we need to start seeing what's below the surface. Okay, let's go to some solutions here and talk about what we can do. First of all, we do have to change from just seeing what's above the surface to moving into a mindset of what's below the surface. So whatever the cubs are giving us in information, it's got to be partial, right? Because that's all they're showing us. Partial and maybe even inaccurate. So we've got to make the assumption we're only getting partial information, and probably a lot of it's inaccurate. Therefore, we need to get down in below the surface, really get the full story. The other thing is, again, self-examination. The self-examination is looking to yourself and saying, what fears do you have? What things are below the surface in you that you're not sharing with the rest of the world? What's going on in there? What are your turmoils and whatnot? And when you can do that self-examination, when you can get into yourself and see what's going on, that's going to sensitize yourself and develop the skills so that you can start looking into somebody else and seeing what's going on in them. So this is a skill development by looking to yourself, self-examination, what's below the surface, so that you can then help your cubs by going below the surface for them, as well. The other thing is to start seeing our cubs and become what I'm going to call a poker player. A poker player I'm not a poker player, this is just what I understand about poker, is that somehow the tells are a big deal. What's going on in the other person? What kind of cards do they have? You can't see the cards, they're below the surface. But what's going on? So we look for these tells, apparently. So what tells might we look at when it comes to our kids? Well, one is busyness. If they're super busy, that's telling us something's going on below the surface that we need to identify. If we want to ask them, hey, how are things going? And they change the subject on us, we pretty well know that there's something more going on that we need to find out. Or they go the other way. They dominate the conversation. They change the subject, and they don't let you ask questions. They can go into this domination thing. The other thing that I've seen, at least my kids, they pretend not to hear me. When I want to know more about what's going on, I didn't hear you say that. Another thing is you ask questions, you might get a negative response like anger. They may come back and just show some anger or some other type of agitation, either physical, or verbal, saying things are not going well with them. So the other thing that we need to do to look for solutions is to ensure that the cubs know that we know there are things going on, that they can give us these deflections and whatnot. Nothing's really happening, but it's important to say to them, Mother Bear, it's important to say, that things are going on. And make sure they understand that, so they can't be doing any end runs on you. They can't be skirting the issue. So that's important that they know that you know. Another thing that's really interesting about this is when they're ready to share, you need to be ready to listen. And that's 24/7. I remember a person introduced me to that concept way back. It was a mother bear, and she's told me she had most of her conversations with her kids at between 1 and 2 in the morning. Well, that seemed to be outside my box, but she said, hey, if I want to hear and I want to have a conversation, I need to be ready when they're ready rather than the other way around. So that's a requirement. The last thing I want to share with you is that to really know what's going on, if they do share with you, you need to be an absolutely perfect, safe place. You have to be a safe place And the definition of a safe place is whatever they tell you doesn't go anywhere other than yourself. Doesn't go to some group that you're in. It doesn't even go to your spouse. Nobody. Hear this. Please hear this. When they tell you something, it stays with you. No more, no less. Then you become a safe place, and they'll share more with you. Okay, so I gave you some ideas and some concepts here how to start seeing below the surface. And when we can see it and we hear from our cubs some of what their issues are, then we're going to be in a position of preventing destructive behavior, from them. Then we can help them with their issues. But we need to be able to see below the surface. Okay, I'm with you. I'm with you, Mother Bears. We need to see below the surface. We need to do that self-examination within ourselves. We need to be safe places. Doesn't matter what role we have, whether you're a mother bear for an offspring, whether you're a mother bear in business, whether your employee group, whether you're a coach, you're a mother bear in that capacity. You need to be able to see below the surface, help our cubs so that we can prevent destructive behavior and never, ever find ourselves in a position of saying, I never saw that coming. Okay? Thanks for being with me. I'll see you on the next video.